right, from the Sixers to a Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, that is opting out from working out at the Combine. For more on this, let's bring in senior NFL reporter Jeremy Fowler and NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. What more can you tell us about Sanders' decision not to throw in front of teams in Indianapolis this week?
Michelle, the teams I've spoken to today are not overly surprised. They say that several of the top quarterbacks in recent years have opted out of throwing, preferring that more familiar setting on their campus at their pro day. And the messaging teams have received, at least from Sanders' camp, is that he does want to highlight his Colorado receivers. He's got several pass catchers that are draft eligible and are good players. He wants to make sure those players get the proper publicity. He's still going to go to Indianapolis and interview. That's considered a strength of his. He should shine in those interview settings, especially with the Sanders personality. And the coaches I talked to today said, look, I would have liked to have seen him throw, but I guess I'm just going to have to make that trip to Colorado to see it.
Yeah, and Tim, Jeremy's exactly right. Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May, none of those guys threw at the Combine last year. So what do you make of Shedeur's decision not to work out in front of teams this week?
It makes sense, and it makes sense just like for the guys in previous years to not do it in that environment when you have a high grade and you're projected to go in the early first round. You don't need to. Like the decision to not throw at the Combine and only throw at your pro day isn't going to affect you. It's not going to hurt your draft stock. So, I think for really any prospect, not just the quarterbacks, if you're not guaranteed that you're going to go and perform well in the Combine environment, so whether it's running a 40, whether it's throwing, whatever position drills, whatever it may be, if you're not positive that you're going to do well and you're going to help yourself, if you're a top prospect, there really isn't an advantage, or certainly not a disadvantage, to sitting that out and then performing in a more controlled environment that you're in charge of at your own school. So I don't think it'll hurt Sanders. I think it makes sense for these prospects, just the world we're living in now.
Speaking of that controlled environment, Colorado's Pro Day is on March 19. That's about 3 weeks from today. Jeremy, Tim, thanks so much, and we will get more from you in a bit.
And we're just getting started on SportsCenter. T-minus 2 weeks until NFL free agency. Will Sam Darnold move on from the Vikings, and a pair of Super Bowl players who may be moving on themselves next season? And don't look now, but Steph Curry and the Warriors are getting hot. We'll give you the biggest reason for their recent run. And, hey, have you hugged someone who posterized you today?
No.
No? Well, you know what?
Not yet.
We should all learn from Ja. He did that yesterday. It's a moment you got to see when we come back. I would never posterize you.
Oh, really?
No, never.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. On the clock, we are exactly 2 weeks away from the start of free agency in the National Football League, and we are back with Jeremy Fowler and Tim Hasselbeck. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. Let's begin with the best free agent quarterback on the market, Sam Darnold. What can you tell us about the teams looking for him, perhaps? What's the market for Sam Darnold?
Yeah, teams I've talked to kind of have him in that Baker Mayfield weight class. A year ago, Mayfield got 3 years, around $100 million on a new deal from Tampa. Well, Darnold could get something similar, maybe a little higher with inflation and the rising salary cap, but the franchise tag as it sits is projected to be over $40 million. Most teams I've talked to do not see him in that weight class. So Minnesota has to decide, do they want to go that high? Do they try to just sign him outright to a new deal, or do they move on? I was told pretty firmly that J.J. McCarthy will be their franchise quarterback. It just depends on when. Is that now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now? So they got to kind of decide in the next few weeks which range they want to go. I'm told they are definitely open to a potential deal with Sam Darnold. They have not closed that door. They just have not made a firm determination yet. Meanwhile, you have teams like the Las Vegas Raiders that could be lurking in free agency.
All right, assuming the Jets are not on the table, Tim Hasselbeck, what team do you think would be a good fit for Sam Darnold?
Yeah, the Jets definitely aren't, which does impact his value, right? If there's certain teams that he can't return to. But I think the best spot for Sam Darnold is to return to Minnesota. And I do think that the market will be strong for him. He's a quarterback that has played at a Pro Bowl level this past season, brought his team to the playoffs, had a lot of success, and he's far from 30 years old. People need to remember, Sam Darnold was drafted into a bad situation and he wasn't old enough to buy a beer. So I do think that Sam Darnold, who's proved that he can play in that offense, he can work with Kevin O'Connell, Like, I actually think it's a great match for Minnesota, and I think it's a great match for Sam Darnold. And I think it ends up as, quality starter money. And just to kind of piggyback on what Jeremy's saying about Baker Mayfield, like, that's another playoff quarterback, right? So, like, if you're a team that's like scoffing at, oh, I don't want that guy, well, you better have a playoff quarterback on your roster. There are a lot of teams that don't. So the reality is Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold are playoff quarterbacks.
Yeah, so the Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold switcheroo between Minnesota and New York, probably not going to happen. We can dream here at SportsCenter. But let's get to the offensive line, Jeremy. The Chiefs' right guard, Trey Smith, only 25 years old, one of the best free agents available, really regardless of position. You might argue he's the best guy available in free agency right now. What teams are interested that you're hearing about signing him?
Yeah, Michelle, he's going to be a red-hot name. The Chiefs are one. They would love to re-sign Trey Smith, but it's going to be tough. They don't have a lot of cap space, hovering around $8 million in space. If you franchise tag Trey Smith, you're looking at a number well above $20 million on a one-year patch. So that's something they might not be able to do. They'll at least talk to Smith's reps at the combine and see what they can shake out. Trey Smith is being linked to the Chicago Bears in some league circles, in part because GM Ryan Poles was there in Kansas City when they drafted Trey Smith. He knows what that player can do, and they have a big-time need in the interior offensive line. There will be others. Tennessee Titans come to mind. New England Patriots come to mind as teams that could be looking for interior offensive line help.
Tim, what team makes the most sense, do you think, for Trey Smith?
One of the teams that Jeremy mentioned, the New England Patriots, look, I think he's just personality-wise, I think the type of player he is a total fit for Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's really physical. And I just think when you have a young quarterback, you're trying to build everything around. And the fact that a brand of football I know Vrabel's going to want to coach is about being physical, that matters. And I think it's going to be tough for Kansas City because if they do try to franchise him, look, guards don't get treated differently than tackles in terms of the franchise tag. And so it's probably an avenue that the Chiefs don't want to go down in terms of putting the franchise tag on an interior offensive lineman, which is what Trey Smith is.
Finally, let's talk about defense. Jeremy, Josh Sweat coming off 2.5 sacks for Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. Do you think he goes back to Philly?
My sense right now is no. He's going to get pretty high-end money, only 27, productive edge rusher. Philly has some other needs. Edge rusher is one if Sweat, of course, leaves, but they could look to backfill with another player, maybe with a trade or another free agent. But my sense right now is that Sweat would not go back because his market will go back to Arizona with his old coach, Jonathan Gannon. The Chicago Bears, we talked about them with Trey Smith. They could also be looking for an edge rusher. Maybe they reunite with Khalil Mack, who's maybe the best player in this edge rusher free agency class. He's just on the older side of 30, so that could affect his market. But Josh Sweat, when it's all said and done, could be the highest paid edge rusher in this class, making close to or around $20 million per year.
And Tim, what team do you like for Josh Sweat?
I like the ones Jeremy mentioned, but I also like the Green Bay Packers. The Packers, need a true pass rusher. They were a team that generated a decent amount of pressure last year. First-year defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley did a good job scheme-wise, but sometimes, like we saw in the Super Bowl, it's best if your guys up front can just get the pass rush done and you don't have to allocate other players to the rush. So I would say Green Bay, but as Jeremy said, there are going to be a lot of suitors.